So I think that there's a tendency in those of us who are reading the scripture, who are trying to be strong Christian women, there's a tendency to think that in looking at the saints, in looking at women in the Bible, that they were perfect, right? That they did everything right, and that we really can't compare. Or maybe that they were really bad for a while, but then they had this conversion, and after that they were perfect. And they did everything right, and they never struggled again. And we have this image of sort of this plaster of Paris saint, right? We want to be Catholic women in the image of a person who doesn't even really exist, right? We think, well, I have to be sweet and meek and kind and smile all the time, right? I think a lot of us think the only way to be holy is to be like Minnesota holy, right? Like, oh, I just love Jesus so much, and I made a hot dish, and you're all welcome to come over. And you're right, like, it's not that everybody from Minnesota is necessarily the most charitable person, but it's sort of this like this image of like bland sweetness that we have. And some of us are New Jersey, right? Like some of us just have big personalities, and we're like, how do I fit? And what it means to be a good Christian woman. And as a Catholic, we're so blessed because if you look at the saints, there are so many different images of holiness, right? We have saints who were virgins and saints who were prostitutes. We have saints who had 10 kids and saints who had 1 kid. We have saints who were queens and saints who were beggars. We have saints who were stay-at-home moms and saints who were working mothers. You know Saint Gianna? You guys know the story of Saint Gianna, right? She got pregnant and she had cancer, and they said the treatment we have to give you is going to kill the baby, and she said absolutely not. And people hear that story, you know, the baby lives and she dies, and we think that's what made her a saint. Women do that all the time. I just saw something on Facebook about it last week. Right? That's something that is part of the maternal instinct, and not all women are able or have the courage to make that choice, you know, for whatever reason. But it's not a shocking, unusual thing. What made her a saint was her life up to that point. And her life up to that point included being a physician at the same time that she was a mom. Not because she desperately needed the money, but because that's where God was calling her. Right? See, to be a good Catholic woman doesn't mean that you like cloth diaper and homeschool and have 14 children and mill your own flour and raise your own organic goats or whatever, right? It doesn't mean also that you're president of the PTA and you're leading American Heritage Girls and you're running your own Bible study for the women in the neighborhood. It's not something that fits into one box or another. It's a matter of being you, the way that God is calling you to be. And this is something I think we see very powerfully in the different women in Scripture. Now, in the Old Testament, you tend to have sort of two kinds of women. You've got these impossibly perfect women, and then you've got these irremediably fallen women, right? Like you've got Jezebel, and you're like, okay, I'm not Jezebel. I'm not like dogs are going to lick up your blood bad, right? Like I'm not going around killing all the prophets of God and destroying his sanctuaries. But we also have people like Rahab, they met her and it said Rahab the harlot. That's the way this woman had lived her life, is that she was defined as a harlot. Or Tamar, you know the story of Tamar? Tamar was married to Judah's son, Judah of the 12 tribes of Israel, and her husband died. And so, as was the custom, she married the second son, and the second son had some issues with raising up children for his brother, and so he performed the only act of contraception anywhere in the Bible and was struck dead for it. Something to contemplate, pray about a little bit. So then there's only one son left, and Judah's like, I don't know what's with this lady, but like, I'm not really sure I want her marrying all my kids. And he was like, well, let him grow up. Like, you go back to your hometown, I'll call you when he's grown, you can marry him then. Well, he didn't call her. And so Tamar, here she is, you know, she's widowed, and so nobody else is really going to marry her unless the little brother does. And she doesn't have anyone to take care of her, and you can get into a lot of trouble in that kind of situation. So she takes matters into her own hands. She puts on a veil and she sits down by the side of the road as a prostitute when Judah's coming. And Judah, who is, you know, a fine, upstanding man, the tribe that Jesus comes from, sees a prostitute sitting by the side of the road. He's like, hey, what do I need to pay you? And she's like, well, why don't you just give me your seal and your staff? He's like, okay, so she gets pregnant. He finds out she's pregnant, and he's like, oh man, we better talk to that woman, right? He finds out his daughter-in-law is having a baby, and she's not married to anybody, and so he sends someone to talk to her, and she just says, give him this seal and this staff and ask him whose they are. And he was like, oh, awkward, shoot. And so he brings her, and he takes care of her, like he leaves her in her own tent by herself because that's creepy. But he acknowledges the child as his own, right? Is Tamar someone we want to aspire to be like? No, probably not. Probably not, right? She was resourceful at least, but not in the ideal way, right? Or we've got Bathsheba, right? You know Bathsheba, the story of David, who was hanging out on a roof while everybody else in the kingdom was off at war. He was engaging in some recreation, whatever. And he's sitting there and he sees Bathsheba bathing on a roof. Now maybe Bathsheba is just some poor woman who was taken advantage of by a man who was in power. But she was also naked on the roof in broad daylight in full view of David. So there might also be some issues that she had there, right? And you know how the story goes, right? He's with her and she gets pregnant and he has her husband killed. What do these women all have in common? If you've got your Bible, you can flip to Matthew chapter 1. You see this list of Jesus' genealogy. If you went to Mass on Christmas Eve, you were probably real excited for the angels and shepherds reading, and you got this. And people are always like, man, I wanted the good one. And you're like, well, you should have gone at midnight. Or in the morning, you could do that too. The list of the genealogy of Jesus is a whole bunch of, Solomon became the father of Rehoboam, Rehoboam the father of Abijah, Abijah the father of Asa, Asa the father of Jehoshaphat. There are women in that lineage too. The women in the lineage of Jesus. Rahab, the prostitute. Tamar, who set herself up by the side of the road. Bathsheba, the wife of Uriah. And God says, it does not matter the choices you've made, I can always bring good. You've also got Ruth in there. Ruth is in that other category I was talking about the impossibly perfect women, right? Ruth is this woman whose husband dies, and she says to her mother-in-law of all people, I will take care of you. I will stay with you. Wherever you go, I will go. Wherever you live, I will live. Your people will be my people. Your God will be my God. And every one of you who has ever had a mother-in-law is like, wow, she was already a saint. That is incredible. We like to use that passage at weddings. It's not one of the readings we can use, but I always hear priests reference it in wedding homilies. I'm like, Father, read the book again. She wasn't talking to her husband. She was talking to her mother-in-law. If that's the point you want to make, go right ahead. But Ruth is this upright woman who's going to do right by her mother-in-law, and she's going to marry the man that God has for her, and she's held up as this image of waiting and of patience, and you're like, oh my gosh, Ruth, why don't you ever yell at anybody, right? Why don't you ever get frustrated? I'm sure your mother-in-law was not the most pleasant woman to be around when she said to you, oh, well, you want to marry that guy? Just while he's sleeping, curl up at his feet, right? He's not going to find that creepy. Yeah, he's not going to wake up and find you curled up at his feet and be like, woman, what are you doing in my bed, right? Great idea, Mom, thanks. Or we've got Judith. Now, I love Judith. This is one of the Catholic bonus features. So if you've got a Protestant Bible, you don't have the book of Judith. But it's one of my very favorites. Judith, I think, is kind of the Mulan of the Bible. Right? So, you've seen Mulan. We've got this woman. First, she's trying to be this perfect feminine beauty. And it's just not her. She doesn't fit. So she's like, all right, fine, I'm going to be a man. Right? I don't need any of this feminine stuff. I don't need the makeup. I don't need to do my hair. I don't need to walk like I'm all pretty. I'm just going to be tough. I'm going to be macho. Right? I'm going to be a man. Does this sound like the 20th century to anybody? And the wave of feminism that we saw in the 20th century, first you got to be just this perfect little beautiful thing, and then you have to be just exactly like a man in every way, including your fertility, right, to be able to switch that off. Of course, you still have to look super hot while you're doing it, right, because we're not actually going to make things easier for women ever. And then finally Mulan says, no, you know what? I'm a woman and I'm a strong woman, and I can be a woman and be strong at the same time. Right? And she sort of owns it at the end and is able to find this balance. where she doesn't have to be totally feminine, although you can if you want to be, and she doesn't have to be like totally rough and tough, although you can if you want to be, but she finds her middle ground, and Judith is right there in that middle ground. Judith is great. She's a widow, and she's beautiful, and Israel is under attack. Israel's being besieged, and Judith is like, I got this. So she gets herself all pretty, she does her makeup, she does her hair, she goes out to the camp of the opposing general, and she's just like, I'm scared. Some bad things are going to happen, and I don't know what to do. And he's like, oh, I'll take care of you. Like, I'm a big, strong man, and I can take care of a pretty little thing like you. And she's like, oh, thank you. And she gets him drunk and chops off his head. Sticks it in a bag, takes it back to Israel, and she's like, all right, yeah, told you I'd take care of it. Right, see, here's Judith who's like, I'm going to be feminine and I'm going to be strong. Now, I'm not saying, like, go around seducing people and then chopping off their heads and, like, that makes you the ideal woman, right? But we see in Judith this balance of strength and femininity. We see that those two things don't have to be contradictory to each other. Once we get into the Gospels, we don't have quite this dichotomy, right? In the Old Covenant, you really kind of had the virtuous and then you had the unjust. And there wasn't a lot of sense that there were people who were in the middle, right? God nuanced things as he continued to reveal himself. And in the Gospels, we start to see these nuances really coming out, particularly in the way that Jesus talked to women. You know, we don't realize how shocking it is that Jesus talked to women at all. Because we're used to that. We're like, yeah, like what, like a man's just gonna like not talk to me at all because I'm a woman? Like, I will punch him in the face and file an ICE complaint. Like, I don't even know who you think you are that you're not gonna treat me like I'm a person, right? Jesus, when he's speaking to women, he is turning society upside down. In John 4, it says the disciples were amazed to see that he was talking to a woman, but still didn't say anything, because apparently they've gotten used to the fact that Jesus does crazy things, like talk to women like they're human beings, right? This is a fairly revolutionary idea that Christianity brought about. But as he's talking to these women, we see that there's a brokenness in the human spirit. There's a brokenness in every one of them, and Jesus is reaching out to that. In John chapter 4, Jesus meets the Samaritan woman, and it says in verse 4, he had to pass through Samaria. And people who want to disprove the Bible are like, oh, I'm sorry, he did not have to pass through Samaria. Look at the map. Look at the geography of it. Jews did not pass through Samaria, right? So clearly everything is made up. There is no God, and you're all stupid, right? Anybody ever find that things escalate like that in that kind of conversation? Yeah. He had to pass through Samaria not by geographical necessity, but by theological necessity. He had to pass through Samaria because he had to find her. That's who he was looking for. And he gets to a town of Samaria called Sychar. And he sits down at the well. It was about noon. A woman of Samaria comes to draw water. And I'm sure you've heard homilies on this woman at the well. Who draws water at noon? Outcasts. People go get water in the cool of the day, in the morning or in the evening. If she's going at noon, at high noon, when the sun is beating down, it's because she doesn't want to run into anybody else. This woman is an outcast, and Jesus is reaching out for her too. Now, some of you may have had this kind of experience. Maybe there was one community that you all PCS to that never did accept you, and you felt like no one was going to want you, that you were never going to be at home again, right? It was sort of a dig in. I've got 3 years to put up with this, but really, is it ever going to be any better? Like, maybe it's my fault. This is what we do to ourselves, right? If somebody raises an eyebrow at you, you're like, I must be the worst that ever was. It's because I'm ugly and stupid and fat and no one's ever going to want, right? This is what like maybe it's just because they have a little bit of Tourette's or something, right? And like their eyebrows, like you don't know. But we assume that it's on us, that it's our fault. And Jesus goes to find this woman to say to you, I'm coming for you too. I want to be there for you, even in your loneliness, especially in your loneliness. Jesus says to her, give me a drink. Right? Just like a man. He says to her, give me a drink. And she just looks at him like, I'm sorry, what now? Just how can you, a Jew, ask me, a Samaritan and a woman, for a drink? Because they don't use anything in common. with the Jews, right? And she's like, what exactly are you doing? And Jesus said, if you knew the gift of God and who was saying to you, give me a drink, you would have asked him and he would have given you living water. Jesus calls to her and immediately he's giving. All of her seizing, all of her grasping, her reaching down for that water, he says, that's not anything. This is what we as women do, right? We're always fighting to be better. I think Pinterest is the perfect example of this, right? Like, we didn't have enough to stress out about. Now we have to make like magical cupcakes that match every day of the year, right? And our houses have to be like perfectly chevron striped, and we have to make organic from scratch, pumpkin spice, whatever, all the time because you didn't have enough going on in your life, right? We're always seizing, we're reaching, we're grasping. It comes from this core wound that we have, this belief that we're not enough, that we're never going to be enough. And Jesus looks at her and he says, look, you don't have to give me anything. I want to give to you. Because even just looking at her, this little sass mouth, who says to him, I'm sorry, who do you think you are asking me for a drink? He loves her in that. And she says to him, give me a drink of water. You don't even have a bucket. Like, what are you talking about? You're going to give me a drink of water. And Jesus says, everyone who drinks this water will be thirsty again, but whoever drinks the water I shall give will never thirst. The water I will give will become a spring of water welling up to eternal life. And Jesus starts talking about all this water, and she's like, man, it is hot out, right? It is awkward when I go to the well, and I have to avoid all these people. So she's like, all right, like, give me some water. That sounds great. Sir, give me this water so I may not be thirsty or have to keep coming here to draw water. And Jesus sees that she's broken. He sees that she needs him. And it's not enough for him just to give her the water. Right? He could slap a Band-Aid on it and be done. He says, no. And he looks at her and he says, call your husband. And her heart sinks. But she doesn't have a husband. She's had 5 husbands. The one she's married to now isn't her husband. She's like, and again, I'm not enough. Right? Again, I'm the screw-up. I'm the failure. All I wanted was to get some stupid water, and here you are calling me out. She says, I don't have a husband. And Jesus says, he looks at her, he reads her soul, he says, yeah, you've had 5, and the one you have now is not your husband. Now listen to that for a minute. The number of imperfection in Hebrew is 6. She's had 6. What's the number of perfection? 7. Jesus is number 7. Here she's been hunting for love and peace in the arms of man after man, and Jesus says, I'm it. I'm the one who loves you. I'm the one who wants you. He reaches out and calls out her brokenness. He says, if you want me, you have to own your suffering. I'm not going to reject you because of your sin. But I'm not going to just be okay with you smiling, grinning and bearing it and getting through. This is part of what it means to be a Christian woman, my friend, is that we're not burying our brokenness. Jesus brings it into light to heal it. The struggles that we had in our childhood, the broken marriage, the miscarried children, the infertility, the infidelity, all of those wounds, Jesus wants to call them out into the light because he wants to heal them. And that's what he's doing with this woman at the well. And at this point, she's like, okay, like I can tell that you're a prophet. And later she says, we know that the Messiah is coming. And Jesus says, I am he. To a pagan, outcast woman, he announces that he is the Messiah. You are already good enough. That's what Jesus is saying here. He's saying she has value because of who she is. And you have value because of who you are. We spend our whole lives, friends, trying to be enough. And Jesus says, you already are enough. Because I made you enough. I made you exactly the way that I wanted you. And he keeps questioning him. He keeps questioning her. He keeps talking to her. And finally, in verse 28, the woman left her water jar. She's like, this is big. And she abandons everything. She leaves everything behind to follow Jesus. And she goes to the people and she says, come and meet a man who told me everything I ever did. Does that sound like a pleasant thing to you? For someone to tell you everything you ever did? No, we want to forget that stuff, don't we? But Jesus says, I love you too much to let you forget. I want to heal it. I don't want you just to move on, because you deserve more than that. And then she goes out at the end of this story. It says, many more began to believe in him because of his word. And they said to the woman, we no longer believe because of your word, for we have heard for ourselves and we know that this is truly the Savior of the world. She becomes a great evangelist, bringing people to Christ because of her brokenness, because of her past sin, because of her fears and her struggles, because of her sass. That's what makes her the person that Jesus seeks out. And we want to sit here and be like, God can't use me. God can't use me with my broken marriage. God can't use me with my bad temper. God can't use me. I got gray hair, right? The world says I'm useless now. And God says, you have the potential to be a great saint if you just listen when I talk to you. If you just let me work in healing your heart. And so we see in all of these encounters Jesus has with women, other than the Blessed Mother, they start off broken. They start off suffering. And Jesus loves them even in that. And he draws their brokenness. In the Gospel of Mark, there's a beautiful example of this. Mark chapter 5. We have the woman with the hemorrhage. There was a woman afflicted with hemorrhages for 12 years. She had suffered greatly at the hands of many doctors and had spent all that she had. Now, a hemorrhage is going to be very painful, right? And it's going to take away all of your energy. You're going to have very low iron levels. You're not going to be able to do anything. You're going to become fairly useless. Your family is going to start seeing you as a burden. It also makes you unclean, which means no one can touch you. So here she is, weak and rejected, an outcast who has spent all that she has. And she says, if I but touch his clothes, I shall be cured. Jesus calls to her brokenness, and she's like, I can't even talk to him. I'm worthless. I can't even call his name, but if I touch his clothes, and that courage she has to reach out for him, to walk through a crowd, touching all of these people, even though she's unclean, and to reach out and touch a prophet. Some people want to say that being a Christian is a product of being weak, because you can't rely on yourself, so you have to rely on God. I think it takes great courage to acknowledge your brokenness and to recognize that you are not God, and to let God be God. And so she goes after him and she touches him, and immediately she's cured. The flow of blood dries up for the first time in 12 years. She's not sick. And Jesus wasn't satisfied. Because he doesn't just want to fix us. He wants to heal us. And so he stops and he says, who touched me? And the disciples are like, oh, Jesus, everybody touched you. Like, we're in a crowd. And Jesus is like, you people, just don't listen. Okay, who touched me? He said, I felt power go out from me. And now we really see her courage. Because at that point, she's fixed, right? She could just get out of there. But Jesus says, who touched me? And she owns it. She stands up and she said, I did. She approached in fear and trembling, fell down before Jesus and told him the whole truth. You think you had a hard confession to make. Here she is in front of God and everybody and says, I am unclean. I am rejected. I am alone. And I came after you anyway. And Jesus looks at her and says, daughter. It's been 12 years since anybody called her anything other than woman. Daughter, your faith has saved you. Because he doesn't just want to fix her, he wants to heal her. It's not enough for him just to put a Band-Aid on the wounds. Because the problem with her wasn't the illness. The problem was the suffering and the brokenness and the rejection. And he said, I want you to know that you are loved. And so he calls out to heal her deep wound as well. Think about the woman who anointed Jesus. Remember, she has that alabaster jar of ointment, and she anoints Jesus right before he dies, and Judas gets all ticked off. Judas is like, I was worth 300 days' wages. And Judas is like, I'm not worth 300 days' wages to you. And Jesus is like, no, 30 pieces of silver. Thank you very much. He doesn't say that yet. Everyone says, what a waste. Because that was probably her dowry. And when she's pouring it on Jesus, she says, all I want is you. I don't need anything else. And everyone looks at her and says, what a waste. And I think if people don't look at my life and say, what a waste, then I'm doing it wrong. And I think if people don't look at your life and say, what a waste, then you're doing it wrong. Right? We got a group of intelligent women here, capable women. And I bet there are people who look at you, staying home, raising all your babies, and say, what a waste. People who look at the fact maybe you don't have kids. And you're just following your husband around from duty station to duty station. What a waste. But you know that your life is not about this world's opinion. Your life is about following God and about loving well. I talked to a woman the other day, and she said, I've been asking, what's your greatest accomplishment, your greatest success in life? And she was like, all I could come up with was my kids. I said, yeah, what a waste. There is nothing more important in this world than to love a child well. I have a student who's a teacher. I still think she's a kid. She's like grown and stuff. She's got like degrees. She's a teacher. And she was talking to someone who is, like curing cancer or something. And she was like, that's so great that you're like actually making a difference in the world. And I looked at her, I said, you shut up. And she's like, yes, ma'am. And I was like, you're a grown up. It's okay. We can banter now. I said, nothing matters more than what you're doing. You are in the business of love. And the world wants to look at people who love for a living, whose lives revolve purely around giving themselves in love, and they say, what a waste. And Jesus says that is a beautiful thing. That your life matters, that it's worth something. That it's worth more than all those CEOs and all those investment bankers put together if you have loved well. I think when we're looking through the Gospels, it really comes down to sort of these three archetypes. Obviously, there's the Blessed Mother, right, who's got all of it going. Right? She's amazing. Here's the beautiful thing about the Blessed Mother. There's no description of Mary's personality in the Gospels. We don't know that she was real sweet with praying hands all the time. We don't know that she was very calm and patient all the time. We know she never sinned, but Jesus got angry and flipped tables. So I think it is perfectly reasonable to assume that Mary got angry too. Now, Mary's son was perfect, yeah, but she was a mother to every child in Nazareth, and they were not perfect. I was thinking about the wedding at Cana, right? When she goes to Jesus and she's like, they don't have any wine. He's like, so what? And she just looks at him. It's like, yeah, you just do whatever he tells you, right? And she's got this Jewish mother eyebrow raise where she's like, son, I'm sorry. Did your mother just tell you somebody needed something? Did you forget the commandments? Because I think you wrote those. So, all right, we're good here. I think Mary, and maybe it's just because I got this big, loud, intense personality. I think Mary had a big, loud, intense personality. But the Gospels don't tell us her personality because her personality is not what makes you holy. Faithfulness to God's will is what makes you holy. And so we sit here and we think like, I think I'm not quiet enough, I'm not sweet enough, I'm not gentle enough. And some of you who are quiet, sweet, and gentle probably think I'm not brave enough, I'm not outspoken enough, I'm not evangelizing enough, right? And really, God leaves Mary's characteristics blank so that we know that we can be like Mary, being like us. We've got these three archetypes I want to point out. We've got Mary, Martha, and Magdalene. Now, some people want to say Mary of Bethany and Mary Magdalene are the same person. I think you can read the Gospels either way. I'm inclined to think they're two separate people, and it fits my narrative better. So that's what we're going with today. Mary, Martha, and Magdalene. Now, you know the Mary-Martha dichotomy, right? Martha, stop doing all that work. You are the worst. Just sit around and have feelings all the time, right? Isn't that kind of how it feels when you're changing your fourth poopy diaper of the day, right? Or when you're in charge of the hail and farewell, and you've been like working and like trying to figure all of these things out and planning all of this stuff, and people are like, Martha, Mary has chosen the better part, and you're like, and if we were all Mary, everyone would starve to death. So I'm going to finish making the grilled cheese sandwiches, okay? Right? We tend to think that it's just be like Mary and don't be like Martha. The Mary-Martha story, which is in Luke 11, if you want to look it up, the Mary-Martha story comes immediately after the Good Samaritan story. Jesus says, if you follow me, you must serve others. And then we've got the Mary-Martha story where he says, but pray first. He's not saying pray instead of serving. He's saying your service has to be rooted in prayer. If you look at the other big story we have of Mary and Martha, it's in John chapter 11. It's the story of the resurrection of Lazarus. And Mary and Martha are his sisters. And you know the story, right? They go to Jesus and they're like, Lazarus is dying. And it says, so he remained there for 2 days in the place where he was. Because Jesus loved Lazarus, when he heard that he was suffering, he didn't go. It doesn't sound loving, does it? We think love means I ask for something and you give it to me because you love me, right? And Jesus says, I love you too much to give you what you want. I'm going to give you what you need instead. And what Mary and Martha and Lazarus needed was for Lazarus to die. And God knew better than them. And finally he goes. He arrived. He found Lazarus had already been in the tomb for 4 days. Mary and Martha were together. When Martha heard that Jesus was coming, I'm going to paraphrase this for you. She went out to meet him. She stormed out, stalked across the yard, and she said, Jesus, if you had been here, my brother would not be dead. While Mary sat peacefully and sweetly inside the house, trusting in God's will. She says, look, I know God gives you what you want. And Jesus says, your brother will rise. She's like, I know. He's going to rise on the last day, whatever. Right? I believe you're the resurrection and the life. You're the Messiah, the Son of God. A lot of bitterness there. And finally she goes to Mary. She's like, will you talk to him? Maybe you can get something out of him. And Mary goes and she's like, Jesus, I trust in you, but my heart hurts. And Jesus weeps and he raises Lazarus from the dead. And Martha is this conniving, manipulative fool. And Mary is so sweet and quiet. Start again. Verse 17, Jesus found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb for 4 days. Mary and Martha were together, and Martha came out to meet him and said, Jesus, my brother died, while Mary sat sulking inside, not wanting anything to do with this guy who had abandoned her. Martha said, I trust you, Lord. I trust that this is for your good. I know whatever you ask of God, God will give you, and I know he will rise in the resurrection on the last day. Do you hear how you can read that two completely different ways? We want to make Martha out to be the bad guy because we've been told that being active is no good. You just have to be contemplative. And Jesus says you need both. Right? We want to read that Martha is manipulative because she's asking God for things in prayer, and we think Mary must be trusting because she's just sitting there peacefully. But maybe Mary's just sitting there because she's too angry to talk. Maybe Martha's reaching out because she's come to peace. It's not a matter of what your personal disposition is that makes you holy. I get real angry real easy. And if I take that to Jesus, he can turn that into holiness. You know, I think sometimes, because I got a real big personality, you might have picked up on this. Yeah. I got a real big personality. I was talking to a friend of mine, and we were talking about how some people, they don't have passions, right? Like everything's just easy. They're happy and they're serene and they coast through life. And she's like, it's not fair. And I said, it's easier for them to be good, but it's harder for them to be great. Those people who never get angry at their children, maybe they never get passionate about anything, right? It is a good thing that I have all of these feelings. And those of you who maybe don't have all the feelings, God can use that for good too. Stop comparing yourself to other people. Stop thinking there is a certain personality type that I have to have, crafting abilities that I need to master, right? That my life is measured based on how intelligent my children are, how big my waist size is, how successful my husband is, whether I have a husband at all. That's not who you are. Who you are is a daughter of God. And if you take whatever personality God's given you and you submit that to Him, then He can turn you into a great saint. You know that Martha's a saint, right? Because she takes her natural inclination towards being busy and maybe being a busybody, and she allows God to work in there. Right? And so we have Mary, who's this image of contemplation. That is essential to the Christian life. If you aren't spending time in silent prayer, you will starve to death. Aside from the sacraments, there is nothing more important than being in silent prayer. And friends, I think you need it every day. I'll tell you this. There are saints who never prayed the rosary. Rosary is a beautiful prayer, and I think a great prayer for moms. A great prayer when you're really busy because you can put it in fits and starts throughout your day, and it consecrates the whole day. But there are saints who never prayed the rosary. And there are saints who couldn't go to daily mass. And there are thousands of saints who never read a Bible one time in their life because they were illiterate. There has never once been a saint who didn't spend time in silent prayer every day. And you know that's the purpose of your life, right? Is to be a saint. It's the only reason you exist. Is to be a saint. And everything in your life is leading towards that. Don't come here to me with this I'm so busy, I have so much going on, I can't focus on holiness right now. If you don't focus on holiness right now, you will crash and burn. It's the busy that makes you holy. St. Francis de Sales' feast day was on Saturday. He wrote the first treatise on spirituality for lay people. And he said, if you are a married couple and you try and pray like a Carthusian, you have failed at the spiritual life. If you've got a passel of kids and you're like, I need to pray 8 hours a day, God's going to be like, you better shut the heck up and go make somebody a snack, right? At this season in your life, most of you, you're not going to be able to pray hours every day, but you can give Him 20 minutes. You've got that. You might be able to pull off daily mass a couple of times a week, right? Maybe you've got a friend who's got kids the same age as you, and you can swap off. I'm going to go to the chapel for half an hour while you watch my kids, and then I'll watch your kids while you go to the chapel for half an hour. Right? There are lots of little things, big things that you can find to weave throughout your week, but you need the silent prayer every day. That's your anchor. Otherwise, your life runs away with you, right? We've all had that experience where all of a sudden you stop and you're like, when did things get so out of control? Well, it's when you stopped taking them to Jesus and looking at them in the light of Christ. So we all have to be Mary. We all have to be contemplative. We also all have to be Martha. Most of you are at a phase in your life where you don't have an option. You're just going to be Martha, because otherwise the house will burn down and everyone will starve to death. Yeah? We all have to be working in service to the kingdom, but maybe some of you don't have kids, or maybe your kids are out of the house. You still have to be Martha. Which doesn't just mean doing the dishes and doing the laundry, but serving God's children. And here's the thing. We tend to think, especially as women, if it's not miserably hard, then it's probably not holy. Right? So let me think of the service to God's people that sounds the most revolting to me, and that's the one I probably have to do. And so we go out looking for something that makes us miserable because that's going to be the holy thing. Whereas maybe, to me, the idea of standing up in front of teenagers and talking about Jesus gives me a thrill. Most of you probably makes you want to vomit. Yeah? You don't have to do something that you're bad at that makes you miserable just because you think it's holy. There's some gift that you have that the church needs. I just have particularly churchy gifts, right? So like I'm real good at like being a Catholic because I'm good at singing and I'm good at talking about Jesus and I'm good at like reading books and like telling people about these are like very obvious churchy gifts. And it's a great thing that I'm using those for God, but your average parish doesn't need somebody who wants to stand up and shout about Jesus as much as it needs somebody who throws a good dinner party and can build a community by hospitality. Or as much as it needs somebody who's really good at paperwork. Or somebody who can coach soccer and develop relationships with the kids. Whatever your gift is, even if you think it's something stupid, there is a way that that can be at the service of God's church. And if we're taking the image of Martha seriously, we know that God is calling us to serve. Maybe you're just real good at wood polishing, right? Maybe you're great at that like repeated motion and you can walk through the pew and you can wood polish the pews, right? That's fantastic. That is a service to God's church. But spend some time in prayer. Even if you are absolutely overwhelmed and you feel like there's not a single other thing that you can do, maybe it's just a matter of figuring out how to offer up what you're already doing, right? Or maybe what's going to make you feel less crazy is to say, I'm going to teach Sunday school on Sunday mornings, and all my kids are just going to the nursery. And I know there are 9 of them under the age of 5, and the nursery is just going to have to deal with them because I can't. Maybe the service that you are being called to do is actually going to give you a break from your out-of-control life. Wouldn't that be nice? Right? It's like a 2-for-1, right? You get a break and you feel like you're doing something good. But then our third archetype, so we've got the contemplative and the active, but then we've got the apostolic in Mary Magdalene. Now, Mary Magdalene, poor thing, she gets a bad rap. She's called a prostitute by most people. There's no evidence of that at all. We know that she was a sinner because the church calls her Mary Magdalene the penitent. We know that she had 7 demons cast out of her because that's actually in the Bible. Right? So she's some kind of sinner with 7 demons cast out of her who is there at the foot of the cross and is the first witness to the resurrection. Tell me again that God can't love you after what you've done. Whatever she did, she was so bad that for the next 2,000 years, her name in the books was Mary Magdalene, penitent. And she was the first witness to the resurrection. Because she repented. That's the power our repentance has. We become brand new people. You know G.K. Chesterton? Love him. G.K. Chesterton used to count his age from his last confession. People would say, how old are you? And he would think, and he would say, 2.5 weeks. Because in the confessional, you are born again. People ask you, you born again? You can say, yep, every first Friday. You are born again. You are made new. You are entirely transformed. My friends, if you haven't been to confession in a while, please go. I will get on my knees and beg you if that's what it takes. Every good thing in my life is a product of one confession in 1997. And it was a hard one, and it was really probably on the order of the ugliest confessions there have ever been. I was crying so hard I couldn't breathe, and Father kept having to change the subject so I could calm down enough to breathe, right? I know that confession is not always the most exciting prospect. It's so worth it. Because when you are in the confessional, you are being brought back into the arms of Christ. And then, like Mary Magdalene, you can become a great witness to Jesus Christ. See, in John chapter 20, Mary Magdalene sees the empty tomb first. And she runs. Right? This is how I know she's heroic, because she's running first thing in the morning in like long robes and sandals. I don't even understand people doing it in running shoes and like gym shorts and something, but like Mary Magdalene, she runs. And Peter and John run after her. And I love how real this report is, right? John gets there first, but he waits for Peter at the tomb, and then Peter walks in, and they walk in, and they see the empty tomb, and they're confused, and they see the burial cloths over in the corner, and they know what happened. Because nobody stealing a corpse unwraps the body, right? If the body's unwrapped, it means he rose from the dead. But then Peter and John leave. They go back home. They see Jesus rose from the dead and they're like, wow, okay. And they go back to their lives. Jesus later will appear to them, and the next morning Peter goes fishing, right? So Peter, he just took him a little while to get a point, and that's okay because he figured it out eventually. Mary Magdalene stays at the tomb weeping because of her heartbreak. She is there when Christ appears. Because of her big feelings, she has the ability to meet Christ. Sometimes as women, we have really big feelings. Yeah, as teenagers, we had feelings so big we probably could have been institutionalized. But then we calmed down a little bit, but we still have these big feelings, and we get mad at ourselves, don't we? We don't want to be like that. I don't want to cry over stupid things, and I get mad at myself for having these emotions. And Jesus says, that's how I'm calling out to you. That's how I'm reaching you. In that suffering, you are ready for me. But in her suffering, she was also a little bit blinded, right? So she's waiting there, and Jesus says to her, woman, why are you weeping? And she's crying so hard she can't even recognize him, which I always think is kind of funny because he's glowing with holes in him, right? But whatever. But she's crying. Because of her pain, because of her suffering, she's there in need of Christ. But because she's so wrapped up in her suffering, she can't hear him, she can't see him. That's the danger that we have, right, ladies? We have these terrible feelings, and then we start to focus on them, and we start to wallow in them, and we get stuck in that. And Jesus is calling out to you, I'm here. I'm trying to save you. I'm trying to love you. And you're like, shut up. Everything is the worst. And he's like, it's not the worst. Remember that time I died on the cross? That was the worst. This is a traffic jam. You're going to be okay, right? But he keeps calling to her. He's not like, oh, women, whatever, and storm off because she's crying and she's not even going to pay attention to him. He keeps calling to her. He never stops coming after us, right? Because we're that one sheep that he leaves the 99 for. He says to her, Mary. Because even in her brokenness, he knows her. He sees her exactly as she is. He knows her, and he loves her just the same. And she sees him, and he sends her out to the apostles. And this sinful, demon-possessed woman becomes apostle to the apostles. Don't think your sin is so big that God can't use you. Because that's exactly how he does use you. Mary becomes the apostle to the apostles. The evangelist there. And God is calling you also to be an evangelist. That's what it means to be a Christian. Is to be one who's so in love with the good news of the gospel that we speak it to other people. And you can speak from your brokenness. You can speak from your sinfulness. You don't have to come in here and be like, hey, I figured it out, y'all. I got this under control. You can say, I'm still a hot mess, and he loves me anyway. So I want to ask you, are you speaking the name of Jesus? Are you preaching him by your words as well as by your life? So we got to be Mary and Martha, but we also have to be Magdalene. We also have to be apostles, evangelists, leading other people closer to Christ. And for some of us, that means being a hobo and travel around the country and be like, Jesus, yeah, woohoo, I love him. And for others, it's inviting people to church, inviting people to CWOC. Or maybe sitting down with your sister who hasn't been to church in 10 years and saying, can I ask what happened? Offering to pray for people, saying God bless you. Loving people so well that they know there's something different about you. Living in joy that transforms the people around you. We have to be apostles too. Mary was all three of these things. She was a contemplative, pondering things in her heart. She was a servant, serving the everyday needs of Jesus and Joseph and probably everybody in a 5-block radius. And she was an apostle, bringing Christ to others. At the visitation, when John the Baptist leapt for joy in Elizabeth's womb. You know how Mary was an apostle? By living her everyday life. By living it for Christ. A lot of us, we just want to show up on Sundays and call it good, right? We want to give God 1 hour a week, which, by the way, adds up to 0.65% of your life. And we want to say, okay, I'm done now, right? I've checked off my Jesus box. I'm good to go. Or maybe you're checking off a lot more boxes than that. But is it about giving your heart completely to Christ? It's not a matter of obligations. It's not a moral system. It's not a series of vocabulary words that you have to memorize. The gospel is the good news that you are loved beyond imagining by a God who died to know you. That in all your mess, all of your brokenness, he looks at you and loves you just the same. Song of Songs chapter 4, verse 7. God says, to you, you are completely beautiful, my beloved. And there is no blemish in you. See, this God who knows every dimple in your thighs, who knows your creepy, crooked second toe, who knows how you talk to your children, who knows all the ins and outs of your marriage, says there is nothing wrong with you. You're not too fat. You're not too skinny. You're not too tall. You're not too short. You're not too smart. You're not too stupid. You're not a bad mom. You're not a bad wife. You're not a sinner. Some of those things might sometimes apply, but that's not who you are. Who you are is beautiful and beloved. Jesus saw the woman at the well. He wasn't like, this girl's a little bit of a hoe. Right? But like, maybe I'll talk to her anyway. He saw her and he loved her. He saw the rich young man and he loved him. He sees you and he loves you. When you want to drop kick your 3-year-old, he loves you. Right? When you've had enough of your husband and you just want to be done, he loves you. When you're sitting in Hawaii traffic and he hears those words running through your head, he loves you. And he says you are already enough. And because of who you are, not because of who you could be given different circumstances, but because of who you are, you have the potential to lead souls closer to Christ. There are people out there who are languishing in darkness for want of Jesus, who you can lead closer to him because of your brokenness. Perfect people don't really help anybody, right? First of all, they don't really exist. Other than Mary, and she was so perfect she knew. Perfect people who are like, oh, everything in my life is so happy and pleasant because I have Jesus. And people are like, well, it's good for you. It's clearly not going to work for me. But when you're coming from a place of brokenness and suffering, God wants to draw you. And he wants to use that to love other people. Your life has the potential for greatness. Even in the ordinary. Maybe especially in the ordinary. See, I have an extraordinary life, and it's not because I'm anything special. Right? It's because God is doing marvelous things. But my life is really unusual, and people see me and they're like, wow, you are really doing this Jesus thing hard. And that has nothing to do with me because I'm not going to be a hobo, and I'm not like a crazy person who runs around waving her arms, screaming, and using a Jersey Shore accent for Martha. Like, come on. But when you love your children well, that transforms people. When you make lunches like you're feeding the hungry and not just doing one more stupid thing, that transforms people. When you are patient, when you are kind, when you pray, that changes people. When I pray, people are like, okay, well, yeah, you're a professional Catholic. Like, that's what you do. But what if your neighbors knew that you made a holy hour every week? Even though your life is crazy busy and you do not have time, what would that say to the world? The church needs ordinary saints. Ordinary people living ordinary lives in an extraordinary way, and it's you. Pope Benedict said the world offers you comfort, but you were not made for comfort. You were made for greatness. And if you choose to live like Jesus is actually God, and like he actually loves you, and like that actually means something, you're going to change the world. Just by living your life, you're going to change the world. The woman at the well was an ordinary woman doing an ordinary thing. Mary and Martha were ordinary. Mary Magdalene was doing the ordinary thing of visiting the grave of someone she loved. They're not walking on water, right? They're not raising the dead. They're just loving well. And if you know that you are loved, and you let God tell you that, then you're going to transform the world too. So I'm going to give you all a little bit of homework. It's talking about silent prayer. I'm going to ask you to do that just for 2 weeks to start. Just for 2 weeks. Take 10 minutes a day in silent prayer. Just tell God about your day. Thank him for the good things. Ask his forgiveness for the times that you messed up. Just go through your day with him and then listen. Give him a little silent time to speak. It is hard. Silent prayer is hard. But it's only hard things that are worth doing. And the more you practice it, the longer you can go. And the less it feels like talking to a brick wall. When I first started doing silent prayer, I was like, all right, I am awesome at Jesus stuff, right? I'm going to win church. So I'm going to do half an hour a day, right? I got this. And I would go in and I'd be like, Jesus, I love you so much. I'd tell him all my day. I'd pour my heart out to him. And then I'd be like, all right, 27 and a half minutes left. Okay. Also, thanks for cheese. It's really great too. It's hard, but it's so worth it. Because when you're giving God that time in silence every day, you begin to hear him lead you. And it's amazing because you can't be bad at silent prayer. Because you can't be good at it. Because it's not about you. You might spend the entire time distracted. But you showed up and you tried. Me, I pregame with coffee for my holy hour every day. And then I sit there and I try not to fall asleep for half an hour. And at the end of half an hour, if all I've done is think I was having visions, but it turns out they were actually just dreams, right? Everybody ever have that? And I just spent the whole time wrestling and fighting, and I never said a single thing that was worthwhile, and I never heard the voice of God. I'm like, I showed up. See, if I'm giving God space to work in my life every day, he's either going to speak or he's not. And either way, I've done my part. There is so much more clarity in my life since I started this silent prayer. And it's not like, Jesus, tell me what you want me to do. Tell me what you want me to do. North Dakota or Iowa? North Dakota or Iowa? Which one, Jesus? I'm coming up to the intersection, North Dakota or Iowa? I just talk to him, and I spend time, and then I feel like, oh, I should go to Iowa. So I go to Iowa, right? And maybe something amazing happens. You would be shocked at the number of times that I suddenly have a feeling like, oh, I should go to Akron, Ohio. And I randomly go to Akron, Ohio to see somebody that I met a year and a half before, and she says, today has been the darkest day of my life. I'm like, oh, well, that's why I wanted to come to Akron, Ohio then. Let's talk about it. Let's pray together. Let me love you. And it's not because I hear the voice of God speaking. It's because I spend enough time with him that he can speak without my necessarily even noticing. I'm not a saint. I'm not a mystic. Maybe one day. Right now I'm just a normal person with a timer on my watch. And I sit there for half an hour and I give him space to move. And I get to the sacraments. I get to confession. I spend as much time with the Blessed Sacrament as I can. And by as I can, I mean as I feel like. And your life can be the same. Your life can be so much more incredible than mine. But it starts with just that silent prayer every day. Will y'all try that for me? Awesome. What questions do you have?